Kaboom.
Omer, ready?
I am ready.
And action! Finally, we did it right. Action.
I don't have any props today. I'm not at home.
No props, no nothing.
Nope.
Okay, so hello everyone and hello Omer. And welcome to our, bear with me, 14th episode of DevOps Topics.
Wow.
14th, yeah. We've come this far. And today we are going to talk about Git and its relationship with ops. So maybe it will be like Git ops or only Git. We'll see during the session like how it goes, all right?
Interesting. Yep.
Okay, Omer, what's the first thing that comes up to your mind when I say Git?
The first thing that comes to my mind is Linux, actually. Because of its origin story, right?
Okay.
What's Git? Git is a VCS, right? Is it a VCS? Am I messing it up? It's a
version control system, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, made it. Okay, so yeah, it's a version control system. It's a way to distributely. I'm messing my English too. Never mind. It's a way to manage, kind of coordinate the changes on a file system. It doesn't have to be code, although we do use it for code, but it doesn't have to be. You can manage whatever you want. More often than not, it's being used to manage code repositories and large code system, right? Code bases, rather. So the first thing that comes to my mind is Linus, which developed it, if I'm not mistaken, back in, 15, 20 years ago. So he built it in order to have some kind of a version control system to be able to control the Linux changes and developments. So he actually started it off. And I think today it kind of, it has a life of its own and other people are managing it and are managing the contributions to it. But that's the first thing that I'm thinking of. So a version control system, some kind of way to manage code changes in a large code base. That's basically it.
Okay, sounds like you also have a second thing to say about it. So that's the first thing that comes up to your mind. So what is the second thing that comes up to your mind? It sounds like you got a lot of on your mind about Git. I
got plenty. Most of it is actually, you know how I'm used to kind of complain about what developers are, or how developers are abusing some kind of aspects of systems. So I think I have a lot of it when it comes to Git. But no, not really. It's just, that's the basics of it. It's a convenient way to manage. Some people, it divides the community in a very weird manner. Some people are in love with it. Some other people have a lot to say about it, like a mouthful of ideas and concepts. I love it. I have to say, I'm doing really well with it. It has its its weird bits, but I like it. By the way, do you know why it's called Git? I just found out this morning.
Global Index something?
So I knew something like that, but I knew another story, which was basically Linus wanted something very easy to pronounce, which has 3 letters in it and is not used in Unix at all. So he just chose Git.
Wow.
So I think that's actually the reason, but it's a nice trick. If you're interested and you're listening to this podcast right now, go search why Git is called Git. It has all kinds of references. At one point,
so nobody knows.
Yeah, so I think Git in the UK is like a horrible person or a very annoying person. So Linus once said, yeah, I call things after me. So Linux is after Linus, Git is a horrible person, I'm a horrible person, that's why Git is Git.
Wow.
Yeah, all kinds of weird references. So that's interesting.
Maybe we can ask ChatGPT about it. Maybe he'll know.
Oh my God, no. Please don't involve me. I still want my
Okay,
job.
so I have a tough question because we always love those tough questions. It's tough and also easy. Okay, it depends how you look at it. Okay. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay, so Omer, how do you write your commits? Or maybe not even write your commits. So it's like this question is divided to 2, right? How do you divide your commits? Like, how do you decide, like, okay, I wrote this bit of code and I think this is the time to commit the code. And also I'll add, and how do you write your commit message? Like, how do you what's your style? What guides you through when you do that?
Okay, that's a great question because I have a few answers to that. First of all, I wanted to say I want to throw it's not the best response in the world, but I want to throw back a question. when you write a feature, when you change something and you want to commit it, before the message, we'll get to that, before the message, you want to add your code and commit it. What do? Do you normally add the file? Do you normally add star? How do you add? You made changes in a few files because it's a new feature. How do you commit it now? What do you do?
What do you mean, like, how do you commit it now?
Now you have a working copy and you changed 2 files. You changed the README. Let's say you made changes in one of the files, and then you change the README to match the change that you made, and now you want to commit it, right? So you need to git add, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you git add? Like you would add just both files, README and whatever, script.sh, and then you run a commit?
Usually I do it as a group, so if it's related to the same feature, I would commit them all together. But I also have an answer for that. So before throwing it back, I don't want to mix with your answer because I think like from the end. So I want to hear yours first.
So yeah, so
right?
because I'm going somewhere.
Okay. So I'm thinking from the end. I'm thinking about the cherry pick. Like if someone would want to cherry pick my commit,
I'm not going
what
there.
would be the best way, like,
it's a
to
good
commit
point.
it,
But I have a more basic point. I think you're going into a deeper level of it. So what I'm describing now is a mistake I used to do for years, as developer, by the way. And at one point, someone, which was a mentor of both of us, I think, just came to me and said, "What are you doing?" I was just git add files. I would make changes and just add the file and then prepare it for commit. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean what am I doing? I'm adding files so I can commit them and add them." But he said, "What if you made changes that are not relevant to this specific commit? Because like you said, you now made a change and you want to write a commit message. You want it to make some kind of logical sense. But what if I made a few changes? Because a lot of times you make changes, but then maybe I'll fix that. Maybe this needs indentation. Maybe that needs a little bit of fixing." And then you find yourself adding a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily have to do with the commit. So either you write a really long commit message and add, "I made this and that and this and that," or you can just add hunks. So I'm writing in NeoVim, you probably know, I'm using a plugin that helps me do that. You can do that on your own, but basically what I want to say, where I'm getting at, is don't git add a file, git add a hunk, like a specific change. Add the line that makes sense, or a few lines that make sense. You don't have to add all the lines that you've made changes to. So maybe I can now do 2 different commits. I made a lot of changes, but I can do 2 different commits. One of them would be the feature that I've changed, and the other is those unexpected changes for indentation and remarks and adding comments.
Cleanup, linting, whatever,
Yes.
Okay.
So now I'm getting to your second question, which is the message itself, and that builds on what I just said. So my message, I wanted to describe a certain change, one change that's logically easy to come back to and change. Why? Because you just talked about cherry picks, which directly connects to that. And on other cases, maybe there has some bugs or things that I need to change. And if I want to go back and revert the commit or change it or do something with it, now I'm reverting too many changes all at once, which would probably be bad because I'm reverting everything together. I just made maybe some fixes and indentations like we talked about. Why would I want to revert all of that? So if you divide it, if that's the way you work, obviously 90% of the time it wouldn't be a problem. But if that would be your new method of work, it would be really easy to go back to things and make changes and not hurt yourself, not shoot yourself in the foot. So my message, I try to keep it short, not too short. I don't want to do fix, that's okay. By the way, do you know the site What the Commit?
Yeah, you sent me that. It's crazy. Yeah,
incredible.
We'll
So we'll leave that in the description below. We'll keep it a secret and we'll put it in the description. We'll let others find out and have fun with it. So that's it.
Okay. So when you write the message, usually how do you pronounce it? Like in past tense, present tense, or like how do you describe the message? You can just give me an example if you wanna. So you changed, and you just said you changed maybe the source code a bit and updated the README accordingly. You clicked on add. All the files are now in staged mode, right? They are all staged. You're about to write your commit message. How do you describe your commit message?
I don't have a convention or a standard for whether I'm using past tense or present tense. I do try to think of a future maintainer that will go back to the list of commits and understand what was changed exactly, because if that has something to do with a certain bug, I want to help my maintainer find the bugs.
See what you just said? You said what was changed exactly. So this is why I'm writing everything in past tense. Like in this commit, I fixed this and that. I modified this and that. So also, how do you start your commit message? Do you like to start it with maybe a verb, maybe like saying fixed whatever, modified this and that, or you just shoot at it like in a logical English
I think naturally I do both. I use past tense and I use a verb to begin with. I don't think I've ever thought of it in the sense of having a standard or something constant.
I'm trying. Do you also know the cool feature? I'm not say cool feature of Git, but there's the commit message and there's also the commit details message. Do you know that?
Not sure. No.
So okay, so when you are editing a file on GitHub, okay, for example, or any online Git provider, you'll notice you can, let's say you add the README, okay? Most of us maybe just edit the README if you see a glitch, you know? So you edit the README and then you see, okay, this is the commit message and the default one is like updated, right? README MD, okay?
Yeah.
And then below you see a large text box and you're like, what is that? And that's the commits description. Now, this is when you do it online, but if you want to do it like when you're offline, let's say on Visual Studio Code, if you just write down the commit message and then hit like Shift, Enter, so you drop down 2 lines, you can write down like a bunch of stuff in that same commit. And then you have the short commit message, and to that same commit, you can have like a large description of, okay, so I consulted with Omer about this bug and he blah, blah, blah. Do you use that?
Almost never, only when it has to do with huge features. And then I want to describe a long list of stuff that I made changes to. But again, I'm 90% of the times, 99% of the times, I want my changes to be very small and very precise. So it's easy to go back and revert them. But I think I've used it like a handful of times, not more than that. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's like a multi-line long message that you can add a long description to it. Yeah, definitely.
So I use it to have fun, usually. So in case I'm working on something very, very long time, then I write down, this took me a long time, I am sad about this commit, you know, I write down a story, you know, but not something professional, you know what I mean? So it's mostly for jokes. That's my stuff with that description thingy.
Okay, I want to go back a little bit, zoom out and speak a little bit about the structure, not the structure of GitHub, the nature of it, because I have something important that I want to say to the world.
Go ahead and say to the world.
I think we both know, but comment on it if you think I need to be fixed at some point. So if I'm not mistaken, Git is basically like Bitcoin, actually. It's like a distributed system, right? You get the same copy of the entire repository with everything, the metadata, the history, the entire tree. Every time someone Git clones something, it has the entire history like anyone else, whether that's GitHub, GitLab, any platform that it sits on, including your computer, you have the entire copy. So if all the other copies are removed, deleted, scratched, and you have your own copy, you can revive everything else, right? So in that sense, it's like a Bitcoin ledger. It sits everywhere. It's completely distributed. There's no one source that if that's gone, everything else is gone. And beyond that, like I said, there's a huge history. What I mean by huge, from the first commit to your present, unless you've made changes to the history, which usually is something you don't want to go to, unless there's a very good reason, which I'll speak to in a minute. The entire history of changes is recorded in your tree. While you don't see that, because obviously you made changes, you've made indents, code additions, code removals, deletions of lines and strings and whatever you made, the entire history of changes is still there. What I'm getting at is, a lot of times, at least in my case, I've seen people commit keys and changes, and two changes. They've committed secrets and keys and sensitive data that shouldn't be part of the system. And then you find it, whether with a tool or with your own eyes or in a PR review, and then you ask them to remove it. And then usually the unexperienced ones would just go, no worries, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for the commit that I've made. I'll either revert it or just delete the string and commit it. And that's all fine. There you go. It's gone. But it's not really gone. It's still in the history forever. So that's something to understand about the nature of Git. The entire history is there. The tree is there. Wherever it's being cloned and retrieved, it's there. And it will only update itself in the next time that someone pulls and makes changes to it. So that's one thing to understand, and I think is very important. And the other is, if you do want to remove from the history, there are all kinds of methods. My favorite one is using a tool that's called the BFG repo cleaner. Do you know that one?
I think we also talked about in one of the other sessions, I think.
But I think I mention it a lot, so I'm just saying, if you've committed something sensitive, you need to remove it from the entire history. One way to do that is use this PFG repo cleaner. There are tons of other tools. That's it. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, great. Okay, it's important. Also, let's say if you made a small mistake, let's say, okay, so if what you just said happened now, so you saw one of the developers committing something and they pushed. So one thing could be like they can just rebase their current commit. Look, so BFG is usually used for changing something that maybe was very old, or you found out something very big or very old in your repository that you want to delete from all the commits. Okay?
Yeah.
And if you guys maybe, or girls, if you made a small mistake maybe on your latest commit, you can just git reset head ~1 something like that, and then a soft commit maybe add some -- soft, remove the password, commit again, and git push force to your feature branch. We don't push force to production development or whatever. Okay.
That's a very important comment, and that's just to add, the -- soft is in order to keep the file that you've changed still in your repository. If you do -- hard, it removes everything, including the file. So head ~1 would mean remove the last commit from my head. By the way, if you didn't push, you don't need to push force. If you just committed, all you have to do is just reset.
Right.
You don't have to push anything.
Okay, so a friend of mine, and his name is Omer,
okay,
told me, listen, if you commit too many things that are related to the same commit, what you can do, and then I'll give you the stage to talk about it because you told me about it, so I want to give it to you. You can just squash. So Omer, what is squash? What do you mean by git squash? What is that?
Okay, squashing is basically for large code bases. If you add too many commits, I mean, I talked about it before, how beneficial it is to use small commits for small changes. So it's easy to retrieve what was changed and find it, maybe remove it, not remove it, change it, whatever. You want to debug your history. If you do too many of them, it works in the other way. It's just unproductive in the other way because you have too many of them. Every small word of every small change, if that's a new commit, it's hard to go through. Imagine having hundreds and thousands of these. So squash is the ability to literally squash, like, let's say 10, 15 commits, which I've made changes to because whatever, I want to keep track. Maybe I wanted to test something. So I can squash them together into one commit that makes sense in the feature that I've just merged into the master branch or staging branch. Okay. I think the only place that I'm using it at the moment, I'm not even doing it manually. I think squash is basically a rebase. It's a git rebase feature. I'm just using it with GitHub or GitLab when I'm merging the pull request. So when someone has a set of changes and that's merged into the master branch, unless there's a very good reason to, I think there's almost never a reason to, I just squash everything and just saying this feature was merged into here. Because the debugging process should have ended at that point.
You mean squash like you choose that option in the pull request, right? Like squash and merge?
Yes. Okay. Regardless of how many commits were introduced to this change, I want to squash them together into one. So that's introduced to the main branch. And the reason is that I assume that the entire debugging process has ended at that point. The developer had done some 1, 2, 3 changes. He's tested to the best of his ability. And now we have a working feature that can be merged and introduced to the entire system. And from that point on, we can run forward, and the debugging process is now takes another level of perspective. It's like a higher zoom out, where I'm looking at the entire system rather than at a specific feature. I hope that makes sense, what I'm saying.
Yeah, it does.
So,
I can give you even like a very sad practical example of when I use squash, and I think that's like the common use case for DevOps engineers who use Git and want to hide their work. Okay, so for example, if you want to test the CI/CD, but specifically like not the code, but something in the configuration and the runners and whatever, and you actually need to commit and push, you need to re-trigger the push event in Git, in your CI/CD service. So just for that example, I don't want to pollute the repository, and on the other hand, I do want to commit and push to check the whole workflow and how it works. So you'll see my commits are like, I'm not ashamed of doing like in the commit message, attempt number 1, checking like they say, okay, last attempt. And then I write like, yalla ve, so I write weird commit messages. And after I'm like, okay, I'm satisfied with just what happened. I'm like, okay, so let's git rebase, interactive, get back like 10 commits, squash them all because my friend Omer told me about it. And then I can, git push to my branch, git push force to my branch because I have to push force, right? And even if I'm nice, I also delete my runs. You know what I mean? So I delete all those attempts if they're like useless or pointless. You know what I mean? Like if I think like this attempt was not really something I want to look at it in the future, I'll just also delete the runs. So then I get a clean work, squashing it, and delete my runs.
Can I
I
double
see your
click
face.
on
What do
your,
you think? Yes,
I want to
yes,
double
yes.
click on your push force. So we talked about how Git is a history of your entire changes since the beginning of time, which often that's how we want to keep it, because we want this history. It makes sense in a lot of areas, and the best practice is to not ever, but to be as strict as you can with making changes to the history. Rebase, like when you rebase stuff, you do make changes to the history. At some point, it does make sense. Squashing when you merge stuff makes sense. But there are all kinds of ways to make changes to the history, like delete commits. Reverting, for example, is changing the commit but moving forward, is removing something by moving forward. There are other ways by changing the history, like completely removing with rebase, for example, with interactive, you can completely delete the commit from the history. Just remove the change from the history. And that would mean I'm actually taking something that I knew. That where, by the way, Git and Bitcoin differentiates, right? With Bitcoin, you can't just delete something from the history because it has some kind of...
It's a chain.
Yeah. Needs to go on. It's a chain, exactly. And if you break some kind of one of the parts in the chain, something's broken, and you need to have. Well, we're not talking about Bitcoin. That's for another time. Anyway, with Git, you can do that, but that means you've changed the history, and now if you push force, that changes the history for everyone. So that's something to normally avoid unless it makes sense. But that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, so about rebasing, the way I do it, like for rewriting history, usually, well, not usually, all the time I do it only for my branches. Only for side branches, I do find it that it makes sense.
Yeah.
For production staging or a main branch that a shared branch, I will never rebase, also to avoid conflicts, because sometimes like a common thing that people do is like you work on your side branch, and then you want to you keep on your work. And then you say, okay, I want to be aligned with development. So you do, git pull origin development, you pull development, and then you continue with your work, and then you rebase. That's bad. So as long as you get out of development, for example, you do your work, you don't sync with it, all right? If you need to rebase, do it now. But if you decide to sync with development and then to rebase, then that's bad. So only if I'm doing like very side stuff, getting to the side, doing my own things, not touching anyone else's code, I'm fine with it. If I sync with development or merge someone else's branches, there will be conflicts. It will be terrible. I don't mind conflicts, but not when it's like on a daily basis or like when it's done wrong, It might happen, but like we like to avoid it, right? We don't like conflicts.
Definitely. By the way, in conflicts, I have a really cool way to fix them. It's kind of a Vim, it's not kind of, it's a Vim plugin. I'm sure there's a way to do that with any other IDE, but if you are a listener that's using Vim, and you probably, I hope you know Vim Fugitive by Tim Pope, one of the famous plugins to use Git anywhere. So that's basically letting you run Git commands from your IDE. You don't have to actually go back to, if you're using some kind of UI or using the CLI, that kind of allows you to use your IDE to git add, git commit, git push, git everything. But it also has a tool to manage git conflicts. So if you've merged something and there are conflicts now, it can add it opens your code in the middle and then the two different changes to the right and the left. And then you can just scroll through and decide which one of them do you want, right? Because the conflict is basically you have your own working copy and then there's the head and then there's the something that needs to be merged into it. So you can pick whatever change you want without all those weird lining and the machine annotations for the changes. That's it.
Cool. I use Visual Studio Code for that. I enjoy can't say enjoy, but it's okay. I like doing the conflicts. When I do git pull origin development or something, it's nice. So
it has its own.
I got to see Vim. It's like a native tool. You just git pull origin, then you see the differences, and you can say accept current changes, accept incoming changes, keep
Beautiful.
both.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, great.
Yeah, so it's nice, and I think that is it for now, Omer. So we need to move to the corner of the week. Are you ready for the corner of the week?
Definitely.
Let's do an effect. Corner of the week. Okay, so we are now in the corner of the week. And Omer, what was your experience, technology, or anything cool you want to say that happened?
So I'll
to you
actually
this week?
link it to this episode. I'll talk about something around Git.
Okay.
It's a cool subcommand in Git that lets you debug the history. What do I mean by that? Let's say you've written something and you found out there's a bug in the system. Not because of the last change, because there's just a bug. And you want to eliminate it, and it's hard to find, but you're trying to find the commit that introduced it to fix that. But you need to go back in history, and that's usually hard. So Git has a command that's called bisect. I hope I pronounce it correctly. So Git bisect, bisect, lets you. It kind of opens a binary tree in the under the hood, and there's a binary tree, and then you can just go right or left. So the way it works, if I remember correctly, you run Git bisect, and it opens a commit, and it tells you, do we have the bug here? Was it already introduced? If you say yes, then it removes that and goes to one end. If you say no, it goes to the other end of the tree and try to fix those commits. So it either goes back in history or forward, and then you eliminate, like every time you eliminate 50%, like it works with binary trees, until you retrieve the specific commit that had the bug introduced to the system. And that's where you can start the debugging process for real, either remove the commit or just fix it, or the way you want to fix it. That's a really cool tool. That's what I found.
Oh, sounds cool. And then you do git blame, find the address of the committer, of the author, send the missile, and that's it. And it's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
And you fix the bug.
Exactly.
This
Forever,
is how you
by
fix
the way.
bugs.
Fix it forever.
Yes. My experience this week, actually not related to Git, but it's a cool tool maybe for those who use, Omer, bear with me, Windows. I found this cool application from 2014. Okay, it's very, very old. I think they just uploaded a new version in 2017, something like that, which is called NSSM, which is Non-Sucking Service Manager for Windows. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to, let's say, okay, if you want to install an agent, just like you do in Linux or any other POSIX or whatever, any Unix system, so you can do that also for Windows if you use NSSM, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you just tell it, okay, listen, I want you to take, so let's say it's a Python script, okay? You use NSSM, you tell it, I want to create this service which runs this Python script, and then the Python script runs all the time, even if you restart the machine, just like as a normal service would. So that's a very cool tool that I found out about this week, and I worked with it a lot. And yeah, so that's my new love, NSSM.
Amazing.
Okay, so thank you everyone. Omer, can you just, I know it's a podcast, but I just want people to see the church, behind you, because it's crazy where you
so
are.
I'm climbing in Catalonia right now, and I'm sitting and there's a church. I really wanted the bells to go off during the podcast, but we didn't get that. So there's the tune, you see it. Yeah, there's the church right behind me.
We can do that if you want. Bow.
Great.
Bow.
You're great at
Yeah.
it. I think it's a J job, brother.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you everyone.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week. We'll probably also talk about, not next week, but we'll have another session about Git, because we must, it's also GitOps and stuff.
We're just getting started with it for sure. It's just the basics.
Okay, so bye
Thank
for
you
now.
guys. See you next week. Bye.
Ciao.